Hello everyone, welcome back to our Spring Boot series. Today I'll be talking about how to send a batch of rows to the database using JDBC template. It's a quite useful scenario when you have files or you want to insert dozens or hundreds or even thousands of rows to a table in the most optimized way possible. So let's see how can we do this. So of course we are using JDBC template, just a slide presenting that this is the context of this video. If you want to know more about JDBC template, please check my previous videos. I'm explaining in detail every feature of this Spring technology. I will address others like JDBC Client, Hibernate, Spring Data JDBC, and Spring Data REST in future videos. But if it's the first time that you are seeing these videos, so by default JDBC template or out of the box handles for you connection management, statement creation, and error handling. You don't have to, let's say, write the same repetitive code that you usually do if you are using simple JDBC. And it's excellent for lightweight JDBC access. So let's return to our subject, batch operations. So what are batch operations? They allow sending multiple SQL statements in one go. And these, let's put on these multiple dozens, hundreds of thousands. If it's just a few of them, there is no reason to use batch. But if you have hundreds of them, maybe you have a CSV file that you want to import it to a database or XML or JSON, and JDBC template using batch update can be of great utility. One of the advantages is that it reduces the round trips to the database. One thing is you to, let's say, do 1000 calls to insert 1000 rows in a table. Another way is just you send one call to the database and you send 1000 rows. It's completely different, and the performance, it's really completely different. And of course you will have less transaction overhead, meaning that rather than have 1000 transactions, you only have one. And of course you have other advantages like the memory consumption in loops. It's an ideal use case when you have large scale inserts or updates, usually associated with import jobs. By the way, there are other technologies to handle batches if you have the need to perform workflows. For instance, when you are importing batches, you don't want to use JDBC template batch update because this is just a statement to insert a bunch of rows in one go. But if you need workflow, you have Spring Batch and other technologies that can help you, because they have this concept of steps and workflows, and you can decide what happens if something is wrong, if something goes correct. Maybe you don't want to stop the system, you want to continue using different paths and things like that. So for simple imports, batch operations using JDBC template are enough. But if you need more than that, check Spring Batch. Let's start with our statements. Let's start with a basic example, like the most simple way to use batch update, and I will show you at least 3 different ways to use the batch update. It's using a list of arrays of objects, where you can see that you have multiple rows here, and since JDBC template always use a prepare statement behind the scenes, you will have these question marks, and you can guess this first question mark will be for the first value of the array, and the second for the second, and so on, which means that if we have 2 rows, this batch update will go through all the rows of this list and will create inserts to send the database, but as a batch. It's not that you will open a transaction, send an insert, and commit a transaction, and the second. Otherwise, it's just replacing a loop. Now it will handle as a batch, and most of the database understand this concept. Another way to do it is using BatchPreparedStatementSetter. In this form, you have more control of what's happening. Here, it's just a binding between the question mark and the values. Here, you have, for instance, a list. Let's say it is this product list. So it will give you a prepare statement, a position. Let's say I'm doing the first call, and then you do whatever you want. Okay, and you have this get I, you will take advantage of this position, and you use here, imagine that you have 10 rows. So it will, and it knows about the number of rows that it should call, because you are putting this method here, say, okay, my batch contains this number of rows. So you receive here 0, 1, 2, 3, and you take advantage of this, and whatever this list was created, maybe it's a parameter of your method, you go there and you get this row, and then you get the price and you get the ID and so on and so on. So you have more control on this. So now you can access directly the list and you choose whatever you want. At the end of the day, you can put here and get the value from a completely different place. You are not obligated to use this product list. You remember it's just a query, and the batch update, the only thing that he wants to understand is how many times you will call this block of code. What's inside, it's on you. Okay. Another one, it's more sophisticated and more modern. It appears after Spring 5. It's called Parameterized Prepare Statement Setter, and you can see this is a generic. So it understands the type. It's not like this one where you have just a position and you do whatever you want, or like this one where you have objects, the first one that we saw. But here, when you instantiate this setter, you say explicitly what is your data type. So it will provide you for each one of the entities that you have, for instance, in this list, each one of the entities. But you can see on the signature that you have the statement, you have the list here that you have to provide, and you can even pass the batch size. The batch size here, it's not that you imagine that this list has 1000 elements. If you put a batch size of 100, it will create 10 different batches. So it will create 100 for the first 100 items. It will do, let's say, the SQL that you have here. Let's imagine that it's an insert. Then it will be for the second batch, for the second 100 and the third 100, and so on and so on. So you can define, you can split your big number in smaller batch. Sometimes if you have, let's say, 1 million, it's not a good idea to send 1 million in a row. Probably most of database will block and say it's too many information. Sometimes there are, let's say, some limits on the number of characters that we are sending, the number of statements that you are sending, even in batch. So you have to sometimes read the documentation about the database, and probably you will receive an error and you will guess. But at the end of the day, just try to do some tests before putting this in production. If you understand that, for instance, you can receive a file with, let's say, 10,000 rows, just create 10,000 dummy rows, which is the limit, and try to send to the database. If you can, great. If you can't, okay, split in two, for instance, 5,000, and split until you reach the point that your database accepts your batch as is. All of this, it can be executed under a transaction management, something that I will address sooner in future videos about transactions. And the idea of the transaction is that if you put a transaction on this method, even if you have 10 batches, all of them go to the database, so no row will be sent to the database. Meaning they will go to the database, but will not be committed on the database. It's the concept of the transaction. This works because behind the scenes, JDBC template participates in every transactions that are defined in this way or a different way, but I will talk about this quite soon. Controlling batch size, as I was said previously, you can control it yourself rather than use, for instance, this batch size here on the parameter of the batch update. You can control yourself, and sometimes people prefer that. So I define a kind of a concept, it's not mandatory, but you create a list of lists, and you are now guessing what will happen. So I will do a for on this list, and I will create a batch for this list. So what I'm doing here, I will go through all the lists of lists, and for each one of these lists, I just call the batch update with a simple batch setter. By the way, batch setter, it's nothing from the Spring. This batch setter is meaning this guy that we talk here, for instance. Okay, we are using this concept, or if you want, this one. Meaning that here, I just didn't want to put the code. You can create a class, or maybe you can just put that code here. It's nothing related with Spring, okay? The idea of this video is just to show you, or this slide, is to show you that sometimes people prefer list of lists. There is no batch setter, again, doesn't exist in Spring, as far as I know. Okay. The idea here is to balance memory and performance and prevents out of memory error. Because if you have 1 million, maybe you want to split these, let's say 100 batch of 10,000 each, which after you send one, you can commit, maybe you can put some log here and say, okay, the first batch, it's already there. Now the second, even if it fails, for instance, on the 7, you know that you can continue on the 7. Maybe you can put some logic in this cycle to understand, okay, just skip because I already put 7. Maybe you can generate a file or something with a log, say, for each one of these batches inside the for, it was applied to the database. It only failed after 7, so you just skip this first 7 and then you continue the other. That's why some people prefer this. They have it's a kind of a hybrid. It's part of the control, it's with the batch update, and part of the control is on the application side. Okay, you can handle errors in the batch. For instance, these batch updates always returns to you an array. Meaning that if you are doing a simple batch update and you have 1000 rows, it will return an array with 1000 positions with the number of rows affected. He understands and says, okay, you provide 10 inserts and I will tell you the results of these 10 inserts. Okay, I will show you in the practice in a moment in the code several examples using this result ID. So best practice about this, or keep SQL short and consistent. If it's a SQL, it's quite complex. Maybe you are not trying to do a batch, you are just trying to execute a lot of rows in one time in your code. Use prepared statements, not plain strings. Prepared statements, of course, it's already there by JDBC template. Group inserts by table and structure. Yeah, don't try to put in multiple tables. It's not a good idea. It's a batch. The idea of the batch is to be fast. It's just, I have a set of rows that I want to put on a table. Sometimes you say, okay, but I need to provide two tables. Or my experience, and even in banks and big companies where we're using this, we create a temporary table on database. We insert using batch to that table, and then we execute a stored procedure that takes the rows from this table and split for other tables. But don't try to create multiple tables batch oriented. It will be too complex and there is no reason for that. The database, it's faster than Java to handle SQL. So put on a temporary table, because if something fails, the data is already in the temporary table. If it's inconsistent, you just drop the table and you never mess with the real production in code. There are a lot of the advantages to create this kind of temporary table in the middle. Monitor JDBC driver and the database batch limits. Some database, they have some limits on the batch. Use transactions to avoid partial data. Unless you want really fast and you want to avoid transactions, some database accept that you send batch and they say, please ignore the transaction, so it is really fast. But there are some tweaks that you need to do to the databases. And try to log batch execution time. It will be helpful for you in the future, not only about the observability of the system, but because you want to check if it's degrading, if the batch has the correct size and things like that. It's always a good idea to log batch. If you are using OpenTelemetry or something like that, a real observability system, maybe you can even create metrics for this batch. If you want to know more, I'm creating a set of videos. I'm starting to, at this time, I already provide 1 or 2 videos about OpenTelemetry, but I will soon introduce the metrics and you can use them, for instance, in Spring Boot and other applications. So metrics, it's really nice because you can create alerts. You can say, I don't want my batch to be more than 5 minutes, and you can create an alert in a system if you are collecting metrics from your code. An alternative, and probably some of you are wondering, okay, but I can do that in insert. Yeah, that's right. You can do something like this, insert into products. Most of databases accept this format where you put values, and now here you put a list of values. And it's quite fast. I can tell you that I was once developing a system and my inserts always took, it was thousands of rows, 7-8 minutes. And I was wondering why it takes so much time to insert all this data, because it was thousands of inserts. Then I switched to this approach. Of course, I didn't put the 8,000 values here. I split in my batch, but I created dynamically these inserts. I think it was a few hundreds at the time, and I just reduced the time for seconds. Because what happens here, it will not execute 3 inserts from the Java point of view. This statement that represents 3 inserts will be sent to the database, and database will execute there these inserts. So it will be faster than sending 3 connections, just 1 connection, 1 transaction, and 3 inserts at a time. So it's just 1 round trip to the database. You can do the same for update, but of course update is not the same as insert. So there is some tricks, and depends on the database of the dialect of the SQL. You can always put things like this, set price, and you can use when and things. But it's not a good idea, to be fair here, because in this case, maybe you want to use the batch update of the Spring data and customize with the objects, not in this way. So this approach of using a big insert doesn't apply quite well to a big update. You can do something like this when one, meaning when ID1, the value is this one, but you can see that If you have dozens of these, it will be a very complex code to read. So it's not, it's possible. That's why I'm showing, but maybe you don't want to go on this path. Now let's see some comparison between SQL and JDBC template batch update. So you can see here on the table what I was saying. You have on one side the big SQL statement and JDBC template, and JDBC template always wins in all of them. And atomicity, it's the same because all of them go to database and they are executed there. But the other things, you can see JDBC template, it's safer, it's more portable, it's clean, it's object oriented, and it's already as a prepared statement. Here you don't have a prepared statement, just text that will be interpreted by the server. Okay, so and here you don't have manual chunking, meaning you cannot split the batch unless you do it yourself in Java. Here you can define the size of the batch. Again, as I was saying, check your database because it changed, and some of them they have some limitations, but they also provide configurations that you can change. Like for instance, MySQL, you have the rewrite batch statements. If you or prepare threshold in Postgres, Oracle. They have something like called for all SQL Server. They have an alternative called table valid parameters, things like that. There are a lot of things that you can, let's say, couple with your code that you can take advantage of, okay, on your development. This is just some flow about what we were saying. So an insert flow, usually we have this list of objects when we have the JDBC template for a batch. Okay, here you just open the connection, the prepare statement. Then there is this loop. This loop adds the statements to batch. They are not being inserted on the table. They connect to database, but database understands this concept and we will not insert this. And then the statement execute batch will be executed. And then all the rows that were added to the batch will be really inserted on the table. And then there will be a commit transaction. That's one other advantage of the batch. Okay. And just to finalize, so we can see what we were talking about. So we have the batch and you have single inserts. And I think it's quite intuitive, but for having just a visual idea. So when you have 5 inserts, you have to do a loop 5 times and sync 5 connections to the database. On the other side, in opposition, you have a batch insert, just an insert, just one insert, one trip to database with 5 records. And of course, intuitively you understand it's always the best option. Okay, when to use one batch or regular inserts and updates. Okay, use when importing large datasets, you want a batch, migrating or synchronizing records. Again, if it's too complicated, maybe JDBC template batch update, it's not the best approach. There is a technology called Spring Batch that will be better. And when you have something like periodic extract, transform and loading data on reporting jobs, when you have jobs. But if you need these kind of jobs and run, I will say that the best approach again will be something like Spring Batch or a similar technology. But you should avoid when data is highly dynamic, like updates that they have some cases. Sometimes it should be one values, other times it will be different values. Small infrequent updates, just a few lines. Don't use batch. Maybe if it's 7 or 8, you can say, okay, I have the list, I will use the batch. You can, but okay, it's not clear the purpose. But yeah, at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want. In the code, it depends on the situation. Of course, what I'm providing here, it will fit maybe 80% of the times. But I from my experience, I understand that sometimes things that we say are wrong in specific projects, in specific contexts, they are right because it's the only way. I understand that. And of course, results are needed immediately. Of course, batch is not a good idea. Imagine that you have 10 inserts and you have, after one insert, you need to have some feedback because you need this ID. There is a relation. There is the feedback. It's quite important. So you don't go with batch, because in the batch, first everything will be processed and then later you receive the results. So again, advantages of using JDBC template: performance, automatic transaction management, declarative and clean API. Behind the scenes, because of the JDBC template, there is always the prepare statement, and works without external object relation frameworks. It's everything out of the box, regular JDBC, but optimized. Of course, there are challenges and some drawbacks that we should take into consideration. There is no per row feedback unless explicitly handled when we are using the batch, of course, because it's a batch, it's not a per row. Exceptions cancel the entire batch, something that's a risk. Debugging individual record issues, it's hard even to debug. It's the third row, but you don't know if it is the third row that it's failing. You have to look into the code. And not suitable for real-time transaction-based systems. Of course, because in real time, maybe you want to put the data, get the ID, use this ID for a different thing. It's not the best approach for using the batch. So in summary, JDBC template batch operations are great for bulk inserts updates. Use arrays or batch prepare statement setter. Of course, again, gains on the performance and understand when to apply or not transaction behavior and exception handling. So this is what I wanted to explain to you. Now I will show you an example in the code where I implemented at least 2 or 3 examples of what we're talking about, and you can see this working and how you can apply in your code. So I'm following the application that I usually develop. For these examples, you can find this code on GitHub. The address of this repository, it's on the posts of the channel, so you can look there. But and if you are following my video, all this code makes sense, but at the end of the day, it's just a 3-layer architecture using a database H2. So we have REST controllers, we have services and repositories, and I'm loading some data and creating some schema using the integration, the great integration between Spring Boot and H2. So I create the tables in this file schema, and I add some data here with this data, and behind the scenes with only just a few configurations on application properties, like these ones, the database will be in memory, and these tables will be created, and this data will be inserted, which will be nice because out of the box you have a database in memory. I don't have to install, you don't have to install on your machine any database. And this database is quite powerful. It's quite similar to Oracle, SQL Server, and MySQL. Of course, it doesn't contain all the features, but the important ones, all of them that you need, it's there. It even goes far away by providing some specific things, compatibility modes with this database. I have, I think, a set of videos about H2 on my channel that you can try to look for. So, but let's return to our example. So entities. So I created here a post construct. I already talked about this in a previous video. This will be bins. Every time this bin will be created, this post construct will be called after the constructor. And in this case, I have this insert entities. This is just a regular insert without using JDBC template, but you can do something like this. You have this insert values, and I'm providing here the values, and I just execute as a regular SQL statement. And it works on these entities because the entities you can see here, it's just a table here that only this column matters. This one is auto increment, so we don't have to provide any ID. And where is? Okay, this is so this will be inserted. So when I start this application, this data will be inserted. Now on the category side, now this one on the repository, I created two more here. Okay, we can have more than one post construct. Sometimes people think they can only have one method. You can have as much as you want. Maybe it's not a good practice. It's just for educational purpose, but you can. So it's again the categories, and the categories it is this table. It's a financial application, by the way. So you have a name and the type. It's income or expense, and you can see some data if you want to understand. Categories: grocery, salary, rent, and for these entities are where we can buy things or where we can spend our money. So let's return to our category. So you have this insert into categories, these two parameters, a name and the type, and I have this list of categories. You can see here with these values, income, expense. It's just random. It's not useful, but okay, but they are somehow real. Now let's see the statement. So you have here the batch update. We provide the SQL, and I'm using here the new prepared statement setter. Okay, but here you can see I'm receiving this high here, and you can see that I'm getting the category using an access direct to it. I'm not taking advantage of the other one that we'll see, which is this one. Where is this one? This one will be better, but I just want to show you first the one that we talk about, which is batch prepared statement, meaning that here we are getting the category by the position that we receive, and he understands the positions because of this get batch size. So I'm saying it will get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he'll understand that we should call this method 7 times, the set values. And then of course this value, it's there, and on the prepare statement, and the prepare statement of course is associated with this. So this first one will go to this one, and the second one to the second one. And you can see here that we have complete control of what we want to put on this query. Okay, even inside here I could do, I of course it's on my side to make sure that these question marks are filled, these parameters, but I can do calls to other places. It's not a good idea on a batch with thousands to call external things or go to another place asking for information. I would say prepared information so it can be ready here, but you can, so you can understand how high customizable this is. Another approach that I'm putting here, a different set of arrows, that a different set of rows that I will be adding, and that's I'm prefixing them with this method. It's quite similar to this one. Again, it's the insert. You can see here a list of categories. Again, the list of categories. But here I'm using this new parameterized prepare statement setter. And you can see that I'm a generic type. Now here it's the category. And the difference here that these rows are the same. But here I have to get the category by the list that I created. So there's a kind of relation between what's inside here and outside of the code. And here it's more elegant because the JDBC template already provides me the entity that I need. It will go through all these categories here and will give them on the parameter, and I can do whatever I want with them. And another thing that you can see that I was not explaining, it's this result. Here, let's see. Here it will provide for each one of the rows the result. So we expect 1. It will be the number of updated rows. Why is that important? It's why it's not the number of rows, because in an insert probably the result will be always 1. But for instance, if you do an update, your update can have an impact in multiple rows. And so the result here, it will be on there, it can be 1, 7, 0, 3, and things like that. If it's an update, in our case, just insert, so we should see 1. In this, we have an array of 2 dimensions, and that's because I'm forcing here, where it is, the parameter, categories, batch template. You can see here, that's what I want to show you. So the SQL, the categories here on the parameter, but I'm saying that even we have 7 rows, I want the batch to be split by 3, no more than 3 rows, which means that we'll create, you divide 7 by 3, it will create at least 3 rows here, and these will be for each one. Okay, the first here it will identify the batch 0, 1, 2, and for inside each one of the batch here it will provide for each row the number of rows updated. So this is an example that I want to show you if we can split this in several batch, and it's possible. Again, recording what I said about before about the with 7 it's not a good idea, but if it was 7 million maybe it will be a great idea to use the batch size. And of course I'm printing the batch and the results, and here I'm doing the same. So we expect after I execute this code, because it's post construct, to on the database to find these values here, these values here, the system out here, batch insert, and the number of affected rows here, the number of affected rows per batch, and on our categories, these ones at the end. So let's play here our application. It should be fast, just a few seconds here, just a Spring application, but I think it's first time I'm executing it. I'll just push here. And you can see here, batch insert completed. And as I said, you have these 3 batches. So for this one, okay, you can see here on the categories, you have batch and the results. Okay, batch 0, 1, 1, 1, batch 2, and you have 3, 6, 7, because they are 7 of them, but I split in blocks of 3. Okay, and then this is the other one, which is just one batch, which is the previous one. This one here, the regular one with the batch prepare statement. You can see here that I just batch inserted, and you can see the 7 one because my batch size was just the full set of rows. And the entities, we don't see nothing on the output because I didn't print nothing, but I can show you, I can execute here using the API that you created previously. For instance, to get all the entities, if I run, and you can see the rows that we are inserting: Amazon, Walmart, Starbucks, the ones that we can find here. And for the categories, the same. Do this get all, and you can see here the categories that were inserted, even the ones with the method 2, which was our prepared statement, in different ones, and the other ones that was with the other method, meaning these ones. You can see here where it is. These are one, and the other it's below. You can see with the method 2 they were inserted also, and it was quite fast to be inserted. It's just a few. It's very difficult to measure how fast is this because it's a 7, but if I put 7,000 or 70,000, but you can try. You can just let's say, rather than creating like this, you just create a loop and create, let's say, 100,000 and check how much time, and then split in different batch and check if there is a performance impact when you do that. So this is what I wanted to show you about batch update using JDBC template. We are entering now in more advanced concepts about the JDBC template, more enterprise ones. We start with basic things, now we're moving to enterprise. So I hope this is useful for you. I will continue talking about JDBC, but I will at the same time probably start to introduce other ones like Hibernate and JDBC clients. So because at this time you can compare and we can, let's say, make choices about them in our project. Again, please subscribe my channel, tell your friends, support my channel as much as you can. I'm not asking for money, just enjoy my videos, but it's only motivation. When the subscribers grow, it means that people are liking my videos. Provide comments, give me ideas if you want, and thank you for watching.